All right, let's talk New Orleans Saints. Obviously, heading into the offseason, the biggest, most important, critical decision is who is going to be the next head man leading the Saints squad into the future. There's been a lot of rumors, a lot of great reporting flying around which direction the Saints are considering. There's a lot of different angles that could go, and there's an exciting development on that front. The Saints legend has come out with some powerful words with one particular candidate. This should really provide a lot of weight for this candidate to be the next coach of the Saints. Exciting news in New Orleans, but first, I'm Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, obviously, as the Saints look to find their head coach, there's going to be a lot of questions. What direction are they going? Offensive minded, defensive minded, culture guy, young, retread, whatever the direction the Saints are going to go. I think this latest news is an indication of big time support for one candidate in particular. Let's pull up this report courtesy of the Sporting News. While the New Orleans Saints search for their next head coach, one name who has been given a ringing endorsement from a franchise legend is a certain coordinator on the Detroit Lions. That's right, Drew Brees saying the Saints should hire Aaron Glenn, defensive coordinator for Detroit. Brees referred to Glenn as a, quote, leader of men who garners a ton of respect, unquote. Glenn, the Lions defensive coordinator, has been brought up as a head coaching candidate during the cycle, but has been mostly overshadowed due to the bidding war over Ben Johnson, the Lions offensive coordinator. I think the hiring of Aaron Glenn is very interesting. I think it could be one of the more underrated hires. We're seeing his name come out a lot more, especially with what Glenn did for a just devastated Detroit Lions defense due to injuries against a really good Viking squad. It's very clear that Aaron Glenn has the chops to be a head coach, former NFL player, really good player in his own right. I think the Saints could do a whole lot worse. And look, Drew Brees throwing his weight behind this one guy, that definitely will mean something. Miles, I'm curious what your thoughts are on all of this. But first, New Orleans fans in the comment section below. What do you think about the potential Aaron Glenn hire? Do you think if the Saints hired him, would you give it an A? Would you say it's an F hire? You think it's terrible, or somewhere in the middle, it's a C hire? Whatever it is, give us your grade, your hypothetical grade, if the Saints decide to listen to Drew Brees and hire Aaron Glenn, and put it in the comment section below. But Miles, what are your thoughts on this latest report out of New Orleans?
Yeah, I think this one's real interesting, Nick, because I think the key here, the main theme we've been hearing out of New Orleans is that Mickey Loomis wants to be familiar, wants to be, I guess he doesn't want to hire some young gun out there that he has no idea what they're all about. When it came to coaching candidates, he said multiple times now he wants to be familiar with who the next head coach is. And we've named a lot of people. There's been a lot of names that come up that they're familiar with. But Aaron Glenn, this is a guy that Brees is familiar with. They played together in 2008. This is a guy that Brees, again, was familiar with and Loomis was familiar with for his time coaching defensive backs with the Saints in 2016 through 2020. So I think this is another really great coaching candidate. John Gruden's a name that's been thrown around, maybe a little bit more media controversial. I think as a fit, he could be a really interesting guy for the Saints team, but Aaron Glenn is a safer, younger bet that comes in here that I think we've seen him do some really interesting stuff that can pump some juice into the defensive side of the ball. Talked about how Gruden can come in here and really spice up the offensive side of things for the Saints. I think Glenn, we saw, like you said, what he did against this Vikings team in the final game of the season for the Lions really spiced things up on the defensive line, especially with all the injuries they have. I think he can come in here. The Saints, they have a lot of great players on this defense, but it's been severely underperforming, especially the last couple of years. So a guy like Glenn makes a lot of sense to bring him in and utilize the pieces they already have to the fullest of their ability. So I think overall, this sounds like a really good fit for the Saints, another option for them that I think has really good potential to meet all of the criteria that Mickey Loomis has wanted so far.
Yeah, we talked about it in our last Saints video about the rumors about the Saints potentially hiring Gruden, like you brought up, to be their head coach going forward. And one of the big talking points was, look, if you're going to hire John Gruden, the main reason is that you want someone who will work with Derek Carr and maximize Derek Carr. John Gruden is a Derek Carr maximizer. If you're sticking with Derek Carr, Gruden's the guy. Aaron Glenn is an overall talent maximizer. That's what he's become as a defensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. Even dealing with all the injuries, they're getting an incredible amount of production and overall quality of play against a bunch of with a bunch of backups, excuse me. That's a sign of a coach that can get the absolute most out of his guys. And if you look at the Saints for the better part of the last 2 or 3 years, I mentioned this before, they become the worst kind of mediocre. They're boring. They're not maximizing talent. Their star players aren't playing like stars, and their young players in a lot of cases, certainly on defense, aren't taking that next step to become stars, and their mediocre players just aren't getting any better. Right? It's just not very good, right? There's not a lot of energy. People aren't playing up to the level. There's a lot of players that are A capable, but they're playing like B guys, right? That's not going to get the job done, especially in the salary cap situation the Saints are in. Bring in Aaron Glenn, you can maximize that talent, right? Suddenly, when you have to make these cap moves, you don't feel the blunt so much because you're just getting more out of your players, right? You lose $70 million worth of talent to get under the cap. The Saints are 66 million bucks over it as we currently sit. Guess what? You have to bring in a coach to get the more out of less. Glenn's the guy to do that, right? And I think you only bring in Aaron Glenn, and this is where I think it's very interesting that Drew Brees, of all people, said this. If you're moving off of Derek Carr and kind of reloading, revamping, rebuilding that side of the football completely, I think this is an indictment of uh, the entire Saints offense, whether the quarterback position, hiring an offensive coordinator from Drew Brees. I think he looks at the potential guys out there, unless you get Ben Johnson, even though it's a little unlikely, I think, when it's all said and done. I think Drew Brees looks at that situation and say, look, that offense, that's going to take a couple years to get right. Need to get different quarterback, most likely, retool a lot of these pieces around. They got some veterans. They got to get younger. They got to figure things out, get healthier at a lot of these positions, get more depth. That's going to take some time. On defense, they have the pieces. They need someone to maximize that. Aaron Glenn is the guy to do that. Revitalize the offense with a good OC. Aaron Glenn maximizes the talent on defense while you trim back the salary cap. It's a longer term play. It's not a 2025 success story, but I think hiring Aaron Glenn, kind of like Drew Brees probably is thinking here, it puts the Saints in a good position to turn things around and start winning division titles again, circa 2027, 2028. So from that perspective, it'd be a pretty solid hire.